Okay, good. There we go. Okay.
As a reminder for how these trainings will be structured, they will be broken into two parts. The first half will be recorded, and that recording will be made available on the Disability Hub as a resource for all case managers. In that first part, we'll cover some of the more general information that applies to all case managers, whether you're a liaison or not. We'll start out with reviewing Minnesota's employment first policy and the role of the waiver case manager when it comes to employment. Then we'll dive into some strategies around how you can support informed choice, especially when it comes to people whose disabilities affect their communication, as well as strategies for navigating conversations with families who may have concerns about the idea of competitive integrated employment. We'll also talk about customized employment and what that process looks like, which can be a great option to explore for many people. After that, we'll stop the recording, talk a little more in depth about the role of the lead agency employment liaison specifically, and have time for some discussion too. My name is Cole Sorensen. I am a young white person with short dark hair, and I'm using a communication device. I work for DHS as the E1MN coordinator, and part of my role is serving as the main point of contact for all of you when it comes to E1MN. I'll pass it to Beth.
Hi, everyone. I'm Beth Groovy. I also work at DHS in the Disability Services Division. I'm the Benefits Planning Coordinator, and I am a middle-aged white woman with gray hair, and I am in my home office today.
Christy Howe was not able to make it today, but she is our employment first lead. And then, we are also joined today by Denise Paul, the Senior Office and Administrative Assistant here at DSD. Denise has graciously offered to help support this meeting series from now on, so she'll be here today helping to manage the recording as well as taking some meeting notes. We wanted to start off with a note on language here. I am sure you all pretty frequently hear people use labels such as high support needs or significant disabilities to try to categorize certain people with disabilities. You also might sometimes hear terms like low functioning or severe and profound disabilities, although those are thankfully slowly falling out of use. These are very commonly used terms, and there are a lot of variations on them. They are also not objective categories. Every person has their own set of strengths and weaknesses, preferences and needs. The amount of support someone needs in their daily life is not some inherent and unchanging quality that you can accurately measure on a linear scale, and these needs change over time, across situations and environments, and a million other factors. Often, a label like high support needs gets applied to someone who is regarded as having significant, so-called, challenging behavior, or who doesn't use words to communicate, or who has a diagnosis of a moderate to profound intellectual disability, or maybe some combination of those three. But the term is used for plenty of other people too, without a lot of consistency. Even if these labels don't describe a real and objective category of disability, what is real is the impact that being given one of those labels has on a person, and people labeled as having high support needs or similar often face a lot of shared experiences because of that. In our presentation today, we will be using some of these terms. We aren't using them with the intention of giving validity to the labels or claiming that they actually describe a distinct group of people with disabilities that share the same needs and characteristics. Rather, we will use them to refer to the people who already have these labels and these stereotypes applied to them, and who, because of the way their disability is perceived, are at greatest risk of being denied the opportunity to make their own choices and be included in the community. Minnesota has an employment first policy which guides all our work. Hopefully most of you are familiar with it, but I'll review a few key messages about it just in case. This policy means we are raising the expectation that all Minnesotans with disabilities of working age can work, that they want to work, and that they can achieve competitive integrated employment. This policy states that each person will be offered the opportunity to work and earn a competitive wage before being offered other supports and services. Competitive integrated employment should be explored first, and it's only after a person has been given all the information, experiences, and support they need to make an informed choice, and who choose not to pursue employment, yet that non-competitive work options should be offered. There are 3 core values this policy is grounded in. Those values reflect the fact that people with disabilities, which means everyone, including people with very complex and significant disabilities, want to work, that they are capable of being competitively employed, including self-employment, earning at least the minimum wage and benefits, and that every person with a disability should be fully integrated, physically, functionally, and socially, within the workplace. All these underlying principles apply in the same way to all people with disabilities, no matter what their support needs look like. And the same best practices you all use when supporting anyone with a disability are also applicable to people labeled as having very significant disabilities. Sure, the way these practices might be implemented might look a little different from person to person, but that kind of individualization based on a person's preferences, strengths, and needs should happen for anyone. If you're not super familiar with our employment first policy or would like a refresher, there's also a link on the slide here where you can read the full thing. As a waiver case manager, you play an important role in supporting someone on their path to employment. Regardless of what support a person needs or how their disability impacts them, those responsibilities are the same. First is to take an employment first approach to your work. So really just communicating that message to everyone on your caseload that work is possible for them, that there are supports that can help them, and that you are making sure you are offering competitive integrated employment as the first and preferred option. Tied in with that is that you have a responsibility to ensure someone has the opportunity and support to make an informed choice about work, which of course goes beyond just asking them a yes or no question on if they want to work and moving on. It's a process that involves really engaging with them and supporting them to understand their options and get their concerns addressed. If someone needs more in-depth support making an informed choice, help connect them to that support, for instance through employment exploration services. As part of the informed choice process, one option that's very important to share with people, especially people whose strengths, skills, and preferences for a job might not be captured in most job openings on the market, is customized employment, which we'll talk more about later on. Share information about the employment services available that can help them on their path to competitive integrated employment. And then, authorize any needed waiver services and monitor that service to make sure the person's needs are getting met, they're making progress, and they're happy with the services they're receiving. So, these responsibilities are all the same no matter who you are working with. But the way you carry them out may look a little different depending on what works best for the person. And that last bullet point about monitoring services may be a little extra important when we're talking about people with more significant disabilities who may not easily be able to let you know if services are not meeting their needs. During intake and 45-day meetings, as well as other times when you're checking in on how a service is going, pay attention to how the provider talks about the person and how willing they seem to serve them, even if it would require changing up their strategies a little from what they're used to. Be prepared to advocate for the person if needed and remind other team members about Minnesota's commitment to employment first. Let's get into strategies for informed choice and how that process can be adapted for people with disabilities that affect their communication. I will preface this by saying that some of the strategies we'll talk about on this slide will be things you may implement yourself in your role as a case manager, versus others may be something that would be handled more by a service provider, for instance during employment exploration services. However, as a case manager, you do have a responsibility to ensure that this informed choice process has happened. So even if you may not be doing all these things yourself, it's still important you understand what these strategies can look like. Informed choice is a critical component of employment, and for informed choice to happen, people need some way of communicating their thoughts, preferences, and feelings about their options. Most people communicate that using words, whether it be spoken, signed, or written language, or some form of alternative and augmentative communication. However, there are absolutely ways that someone can participate in an informed choice process even if they don't use words to communicate. Any team who is supporting someone who can't reliably express themselves using words should be exploring communication supports and assistive technology that can help the person make themselves understood. Even just finding a way for the person to signal yes and no can open up a lot of options as a place to start, while they and their team work towards a way for them to communicate more fully. Specialists such as speech language pathologists and assistive technology professionals play a key role in that process, although it is absolutely a team effort which involves everyone who supports that person. But the informed choice process in employment should not be put on hold just because a person does not yet have a method of communication that's reliably understood by others. When we talk about employment first, we often talk about it in terms of that people should be offered competitive integrated employment as an option first, before being offered non-competitive work options or purely day supports. That's a big part of what employment first means. But another big thing it means is that we as professionals shouldn't be treating employment as something that has to wait until after a person's other needs are addressed. Just like we shouldn't be telling a person, we need to get your challenging behavior better under control before we even talk about you getting a job, or before we consider employment development services. You need to go to pre-voc and build some more work readiness skills. We also should not wait until a person meets some kind of benchmark around communication before we open up the conversation about employment. Someone can be working on communication and employment at the same time, and for that matter, having a job creates some great opportunities for someone to practice ways to make themselves understood. Regardless of how someone communicates, they have the right to the same informed choice process as anyone. But what that process looks like may need to be adapted to give them chances to communicate their preferences in whatever way they are able. If someone doesn't communicate using words, often the main way they will communicate is behavior, whether that's body language and facial expression, gestures, making sounds, or actions they take. Sometimes those methods are pretty easy to interpret, like someone laughing when they're having fun, or pushing someone's hand away if they don't want to be touched. Other communication might be more subtle, or only something that can be interpreted by someone who knows them well, like a person who makes a particular sound when they feel anxious or overwhelmed. For anyone making an informed choice, having the option to experience different options for themselves is important, but for someone who doesn't communicate through words, these experiences serve another important function of giving people an opportunity to show what they like and don't like using their body language and behavior. If a person can't tell you using words what type of work they find most enjoyable or what they like or don't like in a job, letting them try different options means they can show you what they like best. It's important to remember, though, that there's a lot more to informed choice than just learning about the person's preferences. It's one thing when we're talking about decisions like what type of competitive job a person pursues, what their work schedule looks like, or that kind of thing. But when it comes to bigger decisions, especially choosing between competitive versus non-competitive work options, just letting someone try those options out to see their initial reactions of what they prefer is nowhere near enough to constitute a real informed choice process. It's important to recognize that most, if not all, people given labels like high support needs have experienced some amount of segregation in their lives. And for many people, that might be all they know. A person might seem a lot more comfortable and at ease when they try out a segregated option compared to trying out competitive integrated employment. Not because that is actually what they want for their future, but just because it's familiar. We need to start with the assumption that all people with disabilities want to work in that competitive integrated employment is the preferred outcome. Help the person explore that as an option first, before considering non-competitive alternatives. Another big component of informed choice is helping to make sure the person's potential concerns get addressed. Just because a person can't express them, you should absolutely not assume that someone doesn't have their own thoughts and feelings about the idea of employment, and that may very well include concerns, worries, or questions. Because they may not have a way to name those specific concerns, it's especially important to proactively talk to them about some of the most common concerns that many people with disabilities who are considering employment might have. There's a link on the slide you can refer to which lists out many of those common concerns and some strategies on how to address them. Even if the person doesn't show much of a response to the information, it's always better to give it rather than risk having some big concern of theirs go unaddressed that could have a big impact on how they feel about employment. Another thing to keep in mind is that families and other supporters who know the person well can give a lot of great insight on understanding a person's communication and preferences. They may be able to share what to look for when interpreting a person's communication and a lot of good background information on what the person likes, doesn't like, and what strategies have been successful for them in the past. But the family is not the only voice at the table, and they don't speak on behalf of their loved one. They will likely have their own set of thoughts, feelings, and possibly concerns around the idea of competitive integrated employment for the person, which should still be addressed, but which may very well be much different than what the person themselves thinks. So with that, let's segue a little into talking about addressing family concerns. Many people on waivers have families who play a role in their lives and who may be part of the conversation when talking about employment. Just like the person may have questions or reservations about the idea of work, the same often goes for families, which is true no matter how a person's disability presents. But when we are talking about people who are regarded as having more significant disabilities, it's often especially important to be prepared for families to come into that conversation with potential fears and concerns. Safety is often pretty high up on the list of concerns a family might have, as well as things like the impact of work on someone's benefits, logistical questions like figuring out transportation, or maybe worries around whether anyone would want to employ their family member. It's important to really understand those worries or questions as fully as possible. Ask questions that help you really dig into what's behind those fears, beyond what's just at the surface. It's pretty much impossible to come up with a plan that eliminates all potential risks to someone's safety they could ever face, nor is that a good goal to aim for. But when you get more specific and learn what the biggest concern is, for example, the risk that someone will elope and run away from their work site and possibly get hurt, that is something you can start to find solutions for. It's also really important to be clear with families about roles and how both you as the case manager and they as the family are there to support the person in their goals. It can be easy for a family's concerns to take the focus off the person's own perspective and preferences. A family's concerns are something to listen to and support them in addressing, but not at the expense of the person being in the driver's seat, so to speak, and having the right to set their own goals and make their own decisions about their life. This is something you can model in your own actions too. Encourage the person to be there and participate in the conversations in whatever way they can. Adjust your style of communication so they can participate. I remember a conversation I once had with a young adult on a waiver who was telling me how her case manager did always invite her to meetings and told her she could participate. But then both her case manager and guardian would spend the whole meeting using all these big words and acronyms she couldn't understand until she got so frustrated she stopped trying to join in. Address the person directly, too. Ask them questions and give them a chance to respond, even if you don't think they'd have a way to communicate their answer. Try to avoid ever talking about them in the third person when they're sitting in the room with you. Keeping the person's perspective at the center and using that to guide your conversations can often change the dynamic of tough conversations, so that instead of feeling like a debate between the professional and the family on what's best for the person can set the goal and the rest of the team can look for ways to help them get there. Just be mindful of how the conversation is structured to make sure the person feels comfortable sharing their real opinion, not just what they think others want them to say. In our Youth in Transition Toolkit, we have a whole section about engaging families. The link is on the slide there. That section is full of tools and strategies you can use to navigate these conversations. We even have a whole page in there on how to activate families in the process of preparing for employment. While a few of the suggestions in that section are more specific to youth, the vast majority of it is relevant to anyone with a disability whose families play an active role in supporting the person's employment journey, regardless of age. And with that, I'll pass it to Beth.
All right. Thanks, Cole. That was so great. Such great information and just reminders. So I am going to talk about customized employment a little bit. And I just want to put a disclaimer out that I am certainly not a customized employment expert, but through my career, I have just seen so many cool ways that customized employment has been used. And so we're just going to talk a little bit, start off. I would love to see if you could use the reaction button to let me know if you know about customized employment, you understand what it is. I know there are a few of you in here who know a lot more about it than I do, but if you could just, thank you, thumbs up or react somehow to let me know. Great. For me, it was a new kind of thing quite a few years ago. I mean, it's been around for a long time, but you know, we used to really talk about job carving and what that meant. And so thinking about supported employment versus customized employment. So supported employment is something that we have been doing for a long time, right? Like we support people in jobs, voc rehab and other service providers go out and look for jobs that exist in the community and help people get those jobs. They're listed on job boards or in the newspaper, or they're jobs that are out there in the labor market. And you know, sometimes people need job coaches or whatever it is to get those jobs or to maintain those jobs. So that's one way of finding employment, right? And that is kind of the old traditional way. That's what job developers often did, is go out and find people jobs that already existed. And with customized employment, the very cool thing is that it's the concept is just working with the person and with employers to really individualize the job process, just doing things like negotiating job duties, thinking about how different schedules could work, and then really focusing on the person's strengths and their needs, and then helping to carve out that job that could be a good fit for the person. So I think of the one example that I heard somewhere along the way that is somebody else's example that I have used ever since I heard it, because I think it was just such a great example, there was a person who really, really wanted to be a firefighter. And with his disability, everything was not going to be a firefighter. But really just had this passion for it. And so the employment specialist and the person went to visit a local fire station. And when they walked in, you know, they got a tour and learned about what everybody did and stuff. And the person was really excited about it. And the job developer was asking if there were any positions or, you know, talking about what could be possible. And the people at the fire station were really like, no, there's nothing right now. And as they were going through, they walked in a room that had files stacked very high. And the job developer said, you know, well, wow, there's a lot of files in here. And the person in charge said, yeah, it's, you know, really just been building up and we just don't have time to get anything done with it. We're just too busy. And they made that connection that, hey, this person is really good at doing those sorts of things. And a job was created for the person and they started working there because of that. So it's really paying attention to the needs of the employer and the needs of the person and the skills and fitting that together. So there are so many cool examples that I have seen and heard since then in the last few years that we've been really focusing on and helping people understand what customized employment is. It's a really exciting way to approach the whole employment first policy and that notion that people want to work. And so how can we best help them and support them? And customized employment is a great way to do that. Also keeping in mind that customized employment is not for everyone, right? So we need to be careful of not assuming that because of the person's disability that they need that carved out job. There are plenty of jobs out there that people can fit into and they can get jobs in the community that are just, in the open labor market. So making sure we balance out what the person's interests and needs are with the services and the way we approach the employment conversation as well. So I'll go to the next slide, please. Cool. All right. So there are really 5 key elements in customized employment. So it starts off with that discovery process. So really digging into figuring out what the person's strengths are, how they learn best, what their skills are, what their ideal working conditions, getting to know the person. It's really taking the time to understand. And I know I worked with Margie Webb for a long time, who is a great customized employment trainer. And, she would talk about how going into the person's bedroom, visiting their home and seeing really what are they into? What does their life look like? And getting away from the traditional assessment where you sit down at a table and you ask a list of questions. Asking questions is part of it, but really just spending time and building that relationship and understanding who the person is, focusing on real life. What does their real life look like? What are their experiences and what do they like and not like? And then so that discovery process happens, and then also individualized planning, really making sure that the plan for employment is really person-centered. It's really using those things that we learned in the discovery process to help outline the goals and preferences and the support that's going to be needed. So rather than, again, just sitting down and asking questions, it's learning from conversation and from the experience with the person, and thinking about things like what are options that are not necessarily the traditional options, like transportation. We listed their options. Are there neighbors? Are there, friends or whoever that could also support the person in getting what they want? So I'm going to go to the next slide, please. Thank you. All right. And then also engaging employers. So a lot of times, of course, your case managers, you're not going to be the ones that are directly necessarily engaging employers, but working with your providers and knowing which of your employment service providers are good at doing this is important, and encouraging your employment service providers to adopt this model. is really important. So working with the employers to build those relationships, making sure, like in that example of the person who went to the fire station, there was a relationship there that was being built, and the employment services provider continued to work with that employer to make sure that their needs were being met and that they were getting that the person who is in the job is satisfied with their job, and the employer is also benefiting from it as well. So making sure that the skills that the person has, just really understanding what the employer's needs are, what their problems are, where they need help, helping them understand how they could benefit financially, all of that together, matching that with the person's skills is important. So then job development and negotiation, matching those strengths of the person to the employer's needs, like I just said, and making sure, negotiating those job duties, understanding like what are the, like, is there, maybe there's a different schedule that the person could have. Maybe there, are extra breaks that they need, and is there a way we can work those in, or whatever it is, being able to work with the employer and negotiate those things is important. And helping them understand how, again, it benefits them and the person. And then ongoing support and follow-up, making sure that the person, has that ongoing long-term support that they need. Making sure a lot of times, we know the workforce shortage is real, right? But thinking about how can assistive technology help support as well. Making sure that you're helping to think through accommodations. One thing that I have heard a lot is that employers get very afraid of what a reasonable accommodation might mean. And we've done studies throughout the years, and I've heard different amounts, but the average workplace accommodation is very low cost. And so helping employers understand that, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be expensive or a problem to provide things like that. So also remembering about fading supports. So I was just working with my nephew, helping to try to help him find a job. And a big thing is that there are no ongoing job supports. He's not going to need job supports for a long term, right? It's going to be upfront. He's going to need some help and support at the beginning, but not necessarily forever. So really remembering that, how does that look? Especially when you're talking about customized employment, providing some support at the beginning and then phasing that out if appropriate or when appropriate. All right, next slide, please. Okay. And that is our presentation. And Denise, if you want to stop the recording, that would be fabulous. Thank you.